Today's lesson is the long and short of skirts. Hello, everyone. I'm Mike.
I'm Roger.
And today we are going to be talking about skirts and especially skirt length or hemlines. How far down the legs the skirt goes before it ends. So if we're thinking of mini skirts, that would be a very short hemline, right? It doesn't go down very far. And if we're thinking of a gown, like a wedding gown that goes right down to your feet so you can probably not even see the person's feet or shoes, that would be a longer hemline. And apparently skirts go up and down based not just on fashions and trends and tastes, but all sorts of other things, including possibly the economy. So you can look at hemlines, the length of ladies' skirts, year by year, and you can kind of see if the economy is good or bad based on the length of the skirt. I don't think they're saying that the length of the skirt controls the economy. I think they're saying that if the economy is good, skirts go up. If the economy is bad, skirts go down, or something like that. So the connection between fashion, hemlines, and the economy is basically what we're going to explore.
Indeed, and skirts may influence the economy in different ways, but we'll get into that later on. But let's find out about the long and short of skirts in today's lesson. Here's the introductory paragraph right now.
The long and short of skirts. Fashion is constantly changing, and no piece of clothing shows this better than the skirt. Worn for centuries, skirts have changed in color, style, and most significantly, length. But are rising and falling hemlines just a fashion trend, or do they reveal something more?
大家好，第一部分介绍动词 reveal， 它的意思是透露、显示、展现，也可以是揭露的意思。例如Ken revealed that he was the one who ate my slice of cake. Ken 透露说，他就是吃掉我那块蛋糕的人。或者 The fog lifted to reveal a great view of the ocean. 雾气散去，展露出大海绝佳的景色。
Okay, so again, we're talking about the long and short of skirts. The long and short of something is basically all the information about something. Let me give you the long and short of this particular situation. It's not that common, though, but we are using this to talk about skirts because we have long skirts and we have short skirts or the mini skirt.
There you go. It's basically everything you need to know about skirts in a few minutes, right? We're not going to tell you everything you need to know, but most of the important information is what you'll get when I give you the long and the short of the situation. I'm going to give you most of the things that you need to know in a somewhat condensed form, but more than just a sentence or two. So let's find out all about it. It says, fashion is constantly changing, and no piece of clothing shows this better than the skirt. Okay, I think that's probably a pretty fair sentence. Definitely fashion is constantly changing. Anyone who knows that every year there are new trends, things that you should wear, things that you shouldn't wear. Wearing those pants, oh, that's so 5 years ago or something like that. And you might also notice that after about 15 or 20 years, the old fashions come back. But there is constant change. Fashion never stands still. And no piece of clothing or no item of clothing or no kind of clothing that you wear shows this or demonstrates it better than the skirt. Sure, men's suits do change somewhat. Ties get wider, collars change a little bit, but not a whole lot. If you look at a man's suit or men's fashion in general, it doesn't change as much as women's fashion, and even in women's fashion, skirt length and style, it probably changes the most frequently.
Indeed. So yes, fashion styles constantly change, and of course the skirt is a good example of this, and that's what we're going to focus on today. Worn for centuries, skirts have changed in color, style, and most significantly, length. So this sentence tells us that yes, skirts have been worn for a long time. They've been worn for centuries, hundreds of years, and they have changed in many different ways. They've changed in color, style, and length. Okay, so of course we've got different colors of skirts. Sometimes they're more of a conservative color like black or gray or navy blue or something, or in some situations like during the 60s maybe they were psychedelic purple or something like that. They of course have changed in color. They've also changed in styles, and also they have changed in length. That's what we're going to be focusing on today. The length of skirts, how long and how short they are.
But are rising and falling hemlines just a fashion trend, or do they reveal something more? So this is where we're kind of just going beyond fashion and trends and styles to look at the greater meaning of rising and falling hemlines. In other words, of skirts getting longer and shorter. If they're shorter, you have a rising hemline. If the skirt is longer, down towards your ankles or feet, that would be a falling hemline. And a hemline is basically where the clothing ends. We use this generally for things on our legs, so skirts and pants and things like that. If you've ever bought a skirt in a store, they can adjust it for you. If you're a taller person, you might need a bit more fabric. If you're a shorter person, you might need a bit less to give you the same look, to give you the same shape. I want it to stop just at my ankles. That's where I want the hemline. And in the same way, men, when they go in to buy a suit, often the bottom of the suit, the bottom of the pant leg is kind of unfinished. And once you're in there, they'll get out their tape measure and they'll measure it and they'll decide where should we sort of cut or end the bottom of the pants in order to make you look good. So they just have that one fold over the top of your shoe or something like that. Well, that length is the hemline. To actually hem something is to cut it at the bottom and then sew it so it looks nice and neat, and that position would be the line of the hem or the hemline. So the length of this clothing, generally clothing that goes down your legs towards your feet. So rising and falling hemlines, are they just a fashion trend, or do they reveal or show something more? Do they tell us something more than just that's how long I like my skirt to be? That's what we're going to find out, and George Taylor is a very important person in that regard. Let's meet him next. In 1926, economist George Taylor introduced the hemline index, a theory that skirt lengths reflect the economy. According to this idea, skirts get shorter when the economy is good and longer when it's bad. Supporters point to the short skirts of the booming 1920s and the longer skirts of the 1930s Great Depression. In the 1960s, the economy was strong, and the miniskirt became a symbol of the decade. In contrast, the 1970s, marked by various financial troubles, saw the increased popularity of the long, flowing maxi skirt. However, the theory doesn't always hold up. For example, miniskirts remained popular during the 2008 financial crisis. Fashion, it seems, isn't always tied to the stock market.
第二部分看到名词 supporter 表示支持者或是拥护者，例如 Thousands of supporters gathered in the stadium to watch their team play. 数千名支持者聚集在体育场观看他们所支持的球队比赛。另外补充这个字的动词 support S-U-P-P-O-R-T support 指支持或是维持。造个例句 Everyone in Ben's family is supporting him. Ben 的每个家人都很支持他。另一句 We all need to support our local farmers. 我们大家都要支持在地的小农。继续看到片语 point to 它的意思是以点点点为证明或是着重指出。例如 All the clues found at the crime scene pointed to more than one person being involved. 犯罪现场找到的所有线索都显示不止一个人涉案。接着介绍形容词 booming 表示繁荣的或是蓬勃发展的。可以说 The island's booming real estate market has many environmentalists worried. 那座小岛上蓬勃的房市让许多环保人士感到忧心。又或者说 The company's success is driven by its booming manufacturing sector. 该公司的成功是生产部门蓬勃发展驱动而成的。往后看到片语 hold up 它的意思是成立或是经得起考验。例如 Despite the economic downturn, the small business managed to hold up quite well. 尽管经济衰退，这家小型企业仍设法维持得相当不错。再看一个例子 The house held up well in the storm. 那栋房子在暴风雨中仍保持完好。最后我们看到名词 stock 指的是股票。举例来说 The stock market is doing well this quarter. 本季股市表现良好。又或者说 Michael purchased many shares of stock in the large company. Michael 买了这家大公司的许多股票。另外补充这个字当动词的用法，表示储存或是储备。找个例句 Every time Anna visits Japan, she stocks up on her favorite Japanese candies. 每当 Anna 拜访日本，她都会备足她最喜欢的日本糖果。另一句 The shelves in my house are stocked with cans of food. 我家的架子上储存了罐头食品。
Okay, so turn the clock back 100 years ago to 1926.
Wow.
Economist George Taylor introduced the hemline index, a theory that skirt lengths reflect the economy. Again, was back in 1926 during the Roaring Twenties after World War I, and the world's economy was doing quite well until everything collapsed in 1929 and the Great Depression started. But this is a person who specializes in the economy. He understands how things work in society, how money goes back and forth between people. That's what an economist does. And he introduced this new concept or this new theory called the hemline index, okay, which again is a theory. An index is just some sort of number that indicates some sort of statistic. And this is a theory that skirt lengths reflect the economy. They have to do with the economy. You'll have different lengths of skirts depending on how well or how bad the economy is doing.
Very interesting. So nothing to do with fashion, more about business, but how business and fashion interact. So what is this hemline index? It says, according to this idea, skirts get shorter when the economy is good and longer when it's bad. All right, so it's not super complicated. The skirts get shorter when the economy is good. So when things are good, like in the Roaring 20s, people have money, everyone has a job, the economy is going gangbusters and the stock market is surging, people are feeling good and ladies want to show off more leg. In other words, so skirts get shorter. They start to ride up to just below the knee or just above the knee. Of course, I think in the 1960s, right? That was a pretty good economy, and the mini skirt was introduced right around that time. So it kind of matches up with that trend a few years later, a few decades later. And concordantly, skirts get longer when the economy is bad. So when the economy gets worse, jobs are hard to find, the markets are going down, and companies are trying to, protect themselves. Skirts get longer. So that's when you see longer skirts. And right after the mini skirt in the mid-60s came the 1970s sort of economic crash. Skirts became very, very long, right? Women were wearing those sort of long denim skirts in the 1970s, and that might have been reflected by the fact that the economy was not good at that time.
Okay, so again, people who support this theory are supporters. They think it's illogical. They think it's the truth. Supporters point to the short skirts of the booming 1920s. I call them the Roaring 20s. It means the same thing. If something's booming, of course, it's doing quite well. People are making money. The economy is good. Companies are doing quite well. And if you point to something, you bring this up as evidence. Okay, I support this theory, and I'm going to support it by saying women generally wore short skirts in the 1920s. Okay, so the economy was doing well then, and they were wearing short skirts. But a few years later in the Great Depression, they were wearing longer skirts, and that indicates that this is true because, yeah, they weren't wearing short skirts in the 30s because the Depression was going on. Lots of people were out of work. They didn't have homes and stuff like that. So, yeah, there's no coincidence there that the skirts were longer at that time. It's basically fact.
All right, so there we go. That's the 20s and 30s when Mr. George Taylor first came up with this theory. And how did it work out later on? Did it prove to be true? Well, yeah, in the 1960s, as we mentioned, the economy was strong, business was good, and the miniskirt became a symbol of the decade. The miniskirt was invented in the 1960s, and right around that period, period, the mid to later 1960s, I think the economy was very good in many parts of the world, especially the industrial world. In contrast, in opposition, or to show you the difference, a few years later, the 1970s, marked by various financial troubles, right? We had the great energy crisis in the world, and a lot of different countries were suffering and not doing very well economically. So this was marked by these types of things occurred or happened in that time, and they were things that were very notable, brought a lot of attention or something like that. You could say recent years have been marked by small conflicts around the world that threaten to get bigger, right? We have wars in different parts of the world that seem potentially quite dangerous. So that's kind of a feature of that time, a feature of the 1970s in different parts of the world for different reasons at different times, but a feature of that time were financial troubles. We could probably say economic troubles here too. Economy has a bit more to do with the business of the country. Financial has a bit more focused on the money situation, banking and stock markets and stuff like that. But of course, finances are an element of the economy. So the value of the dollar was tumbling, economic output and productivity was going down, that kind of thing was happening in different parts of the world. So the 1970s saw the increased popularity or trends for the long flowing maxi skirt. So think of how short a mini skirt was. The maxi skirt was kind of the logical opposite of that. The mini skirt was mid-thigh. The maxi skirt was right down to your ankles, and that was a sign of the bad economic times.
And they were very popular then. Of course, lots of women wore those kinds of garments during that time. The popularity just talks about how popular something is. However, the theory doesn't always hold up. To hold up in this particular case just means it's valid, it's true. The theory isn't always true, basically. For example, miniskirts remained popular during the 2008 financial crisis. Remember that happening quite some time ago? There was a housing bubble or something like that, or the dot-com bubble burst at that time. So, of course, the economy was not doing quite well. But women did not care. They still wore their miniskirts. They were still popular during that time. So that kind of indicates that maybe this theory is not 100% true.
Fashion, it seems, isn't always tied to the stock market. So yeah, it's an interesting theory, and it has held up at different times of our recent history, but maybe not always. Maybe it's not something you should base your economic decisions on, as it says, the length of a skirt or hemlines. Well, that isn't always tied to the economy. There's not always a good, reliable, direct connection to the stock market, as it says there. The stock market, of course, being the market where stocks and shares are traded. If you have stock in a company, that means you're an investor in a company. You might actually have a certificate that shows your investment, shows that you own a certain percentage of that company. When we talk about the Dow Jones, when we talk about the Topics in Tokyo, that kind of thing, the DAX in Germany, those are some of the big stock markets around the world, along with the NASDAQ, and of course here in Taiwan. We have our own stock markets, places where investors and bankers and people with money can invest in companies and buy and trade and sell and hopefully have their investment grow and make them some money. But the stock market and fashion, especially hemlines, they're not always connected. So yes, don't base your economic decisions, your financial decisions on the length of skirts of the people around you.
Although I was going to say that skirt length could influence the economy. If too many women are wearing mini skirts, men who are looking at them might get distracted.
Productivity goes down.
Exactly. They may not be working as hard as they should be.
More industrial accidents.
Indeed, more accidents. They're not focusing on their work, and they're missing some financial decisions, so that could make the economy go bad.
We'll call that the Roger theory.
Could be, but I'm sure lots of other people have thought of that as well. But in any case, we're at the end of the second part of our lesson for today. Let's wrap things up now with the third and final part.
In fact, hemlines could instead reflect cultural and social changes, especially in women's roles. For example, the shorter skirts of the 1920s came soon after women in many countries gained the right to vote.
Okay, here in the third and final part it says, in fact, hemlines could instead reflect cultural and social changes, especially in women's roles. So we're kind of forgetting about the skirt index here. Hemlines could be influenced by something else. It could be all about cultural and social changes. Okay, it's not always tied to the economy. Society and culture changes kind of on its own whim or on their own whims, for example. And of course, we've got different expectations in women's roles, whether they should have more conservative roles, being mothers and housekeepers and things like that, or should they be career women and things like that. So yeah, that would more influence skirt sizes than other things, at least according to the sentence.
I could see the logic of that. It says, for example, the shorter skirts of the 1920s came soon after women in many countries gained the right to vote. That is another interesting connection, this time a cultural connection or a political connection rather than an economic connection. So we get this as an example. The shorter skirts of the 1920s, the Roaring '20s, those flappers, as women, very fashionable, modern young women were called. They had generally short skirts, but it was a good time for women. Not just the economy was doing well, but women were doing well. Many countries, especially in the West, they gained the right to vote right around the years the 1910s, just after World War I. And I believe in America it was around, 1919, 1920, women got the right to vote or something like that. So suddenly things are good for women. They're living it up. They're having a great time. Skirts get a little bit shorter. I guess in the same way in the 1970s, women's liberation and equal opportunity and equal rights stuff were coming in. Maybe the skirts got longer because the mini skirts kind of showed the women as a sexual object, but women in the 70s were like, I want to be taken seriously, so I'm going to cover up my legs. I'm not going to, try to appear so attractive to men, a little bit more professional and serious, so the longer skirts come in as women are looking to be treated more equally in society.
Absolutely. And why do we always mention skirts if they have something to do with women? Can't men wear skirts? Well, we're going to talk about that subject in our next lesson. But before we do that, we need to wait another day. But right now, we're going to listen to our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第一部分第二句写到 Worn for centuries, skirts have changed in color, style, and most significantly, length. 裙子已被穿着数个世纪，其颜色、款式，尤其是长度都有所变化。那句子的开头它是用 worn， 这是过去分词，句子里面又没有连接词，所以我们这边判断它是使用分词构句。我们就来介绍分词构句的用法。以对等连接词 and 去连接主词相同的两个子句时，我们可以省略其中一个主词跟连接词，然后把动词改为分词。主动的时候是改成现在分词 VING， 被动的时候是把 be 动词改成 being， 之后再进一步省略 being， 只留下过去分词 PP。举例来说， The bridge was built in the 17th century, and the bridge is a famous landmark in the city. 那座桥建于17世纪，是城市里的知名地标。好，那我们现在看到前后子句主词相同，都是 the bridge。我们先省略连接词 and， 然后省略前半句的主词 the bridge。动词部分 was built 是被动，把 be 动词改成 being， 再进一步省略 being， 只保留过去分词 built。所以这个句子就简化成了 Built in the 17th century, the bridge is a famous landmark in the city. 好，那么课文第二部分提到，在1926年，经济学家 George Taylor 提出了 Hemline Index 裙摆指数。那课文在 Hemline Index 后面接了同位语 A theory that skirt lengths reflect the economy 来补充说明它是一个主张裙子长短能够反映经济状况的理论。好，这边我们来介绍一下同位语的用法。同位语通常会摆在名词或名词片语的后方做补充说明。同位语在句子里面要用逗号跟句子隔开。举例来说 She lives in Seoul, the capital of South Korea. 她住在首尔，那是南韩的首都。那么 the capital of South Korea 就是同位语，用来补充说明它前方的名词 Seoul。其实同位语可以当作是非限定用法关系子句所简化而来的分词片语，像刚刚的例句本来可以写作 She lives in Seoul, which is the capital of South Korea。 先把关系代名词 which 省略，然后把动词 is 改成现在分词 being， 接着再把 being 省略，所以就简化成了刚刚的 She lives in Seoul, the capital of South Korea。 回头来看课文句子里的同位语，同样是可以用关系子句表达，写作 which is a theory that skirt lengths reflect the economy。 这边关系子句的功能是用来做补充说明，所以如果用这个形式，一样要用逗号，把它跟句子隔开来哦。好，那以上是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天的单字吧。
Reveal. When he opened the door, Ted's face revealed a mix of fear and surprise. Economist. Many economists are predicting slower growth next year due to a variety of factors. Supporter. Many of the candidate's supporters came out in the cold to watch him give a speech. Booming. Taiwan's booming tech industry has created a large number of new jobs. Financial. I think Monica could use some sound advice on her financial situation. Popularity. Online shopping has seen a significant increase in popularity in recent years. Stock. Herbert sold all of his stocks before the market crash last year.
Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Roger.
I am Mike.
See you next time.